I've left two handouts on half the chairs. So if you could share, that would be good. And if anybody would like a copy that didn't send me an email, and I'll be happy to give you copies. And you'll see these same things in my first two slides. And the reason why I do that is that if you come away understanding those two slides, my job's been done. And so I'll be embellishing upon those ideas as we go through today. And this, as you know, is part two. Part one had, there was discussions about Adam Smith's idiosyncrasies, that were many, and the unusual nature of Scotland when he was alive. But today we're talking about his economic policies. And it won't be 100% boring.
That's good.
We have an option. Do I hear 45? Okay, insights concerning Adam Smith, part two, today. Okay. Preface. This lecture has a preface and two parts. Part one. This is a summary of the first lesson. 18th century Scotland was like ancient Rome. It was, by comparison, very, very primitive. And today we're from outer space. It's astonishingly different. Adam Smith lived and was a leader in the Enlightenment. There was a version of the Enlightenment called the Scottish Enlightenment. But it was the Scottish Enlightenment 50 years, and it was like an hourglass. All the sands of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, were falling out through that neck, and nothing would be the same since then. Austere Scottish life, they were very stoical. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. There was no conception of economics, and at that time, in the sense that we mean it. And he's claimed to be the father of economics, but that's not precisely true, because he didn't realize he was doing that. But incidentally, I'll have Stuart and I we formed a university. He's the chancellor and a faculty member, and I'm the president and a faculty member, and we have diplomas. So I'm going to ask you a really tough question. Who really was the founder of economics if it wasn't Adam Smith? I'll give you a hint. His birth was 1110 years earlier than Smith's. Who? I can't hear you. A loud voice. His name began with an A. Yes, Aristotle. He talked about, he's the first person to talk about economics. And for him it was a part of both ethics and law. That's exactly what Smith said. And you find a lot of Aristotle in his writings. But
Who answered it?
okay, good. So he'll give you a diploma, and you can. It has it doesn't have everybody's name on them, so we'll tell her make them. Okay. And Stuart, you have a question you might ask at this time.
Oh, okay. Okay, I've been watching the World Cup, and one of the teams in the World Cup are the Scots, and they have followers called the Tartan Army. Okay, now many of you are single malt Scotch drinkers, is the drink of the Tartan Army? And they've drunk out at least once a couple of bars in the city of Boston.
Beer, good. That's number 2. And you can work out these details, getting how you want your name on the diploma after. I'll ask one other one while we're at it. I said last time that he indicated that a particular colony would become the greatest country in the world. Do you remember that, anybody? What was it?
Virginia?
The U.S., all of the colonies. And I misspoke. He said one of the greatest, not the greatest. Any rate, so let's get into this. Okay, Smith was a polymath. People think of him as economics, but his range of interests was quite extraordinary. And as I say, he was very eccentric. The first edition of Wealth of Nations, it costs, they're in the range of $1 million up. They're so precious. And the Humanities Research Center has 6. And they have 3 volumes of another book he wrote called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And the UT Connection, the person who wrote the greatest biography of Adam Smith was a UT grad. And he got his PhD here. And his professor wrote the greatest book on David Hume, who was the first modern philosopher and a good friend of Smith's. Okay. This is called, as you see, a Blackstone chair. And the reason why it's called the Blackstone chair is the seat of it is made out of stone. And the rest is wood. And on the top, among all those petals, leaves, you can't see it, but there's an hourglass. So the young boys who were graduating from the University of Glasgow had to do an oral exam to graduate, and they sat in that chair, and they answered questions until the sand ran out. And if they didn't make it, they failed. Why do you think the stone is stone? I don't answer that. Okay. Here is part of the first one. The remarkable thing is both Thomas Jefferson and Adam Smith wrote their great works. Thomas Jefferson had some help, but in 1776, and they were partners in the Enlightenment. And here the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence along with Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin is there. He was a friend of Smith's and visited them in Scotland. And you can read this, but I'll read it with you. The history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of a tyranny over the states. To prove this, the facts submitted to be a candid world are, and 1, cutting off our trade, and 2, imposing taxes. Here's what Adam Smith wrote. And David Hume was trying to get him to finish up his book, but he was slow because he was watching what was taking place in the U.S. or on this continent. And to prohibit a great people, however, from making all that they can of every part of their own produce, or from employing their own stock and industry in a way they judge most advantageous to themselves, is a manifest violation of the most sacred rights of mankind. So he's saying exactly what, he hadn't read the Declaration, but he saw the same injustice. Here's another one. I'll talk more about lectures on jurisprudence, but it's a set of, I'll do it right now. It is, jurisprudence is theory of the law, and that was 1/4 of his course. And virtually nobody reads this book, because those who are interested in ethics read the Theory of Moral Sentiments. Those who read, like economics, read the Wealth of Nations. But this is out of a law book. The wealth of a state, country, consists in the cheapness of provisions and all other necessities and conveniences. When we go through tonight, think, was he conservative and wanted the government to stay out of things? Or was he liberal and want the government to do lots of things? Think about what kind of country that would be. And I just used ChatGPT to ask what country best represents this. Switzerland. And you can, strong property rights, stable legal, political institution, relatively market opens, in other words, open to international trade, high labor productivity, high medium income, and broad prosperity, decentralized government, and with significant autonomy. That would be to the states and local governments. So, and by the way, I think we're ranked number 5, and the others in between are Scandinavian countries. Okay. This, again, is the part from the Wealth of Nations. In the midst of all exactions of government, this capital has silently and gradually accumulated by the private frugality and good conduct of individuals, by their universal, continual, and uninterrupted effort to better their own condition. So there's nothing about greed in there. He's presumably, that was his principal thought, that greed made everything work, but he never said that. Okay. And this is a continuation. In this effort, protected by law and allowed by liberty to exert itself in the manner that is most advantageous, which England has maintained which has maintained the progress of England toward opulence and improvement in almost all former times. That's a dig right there, as you'll see shortly, which is to be hoped will continue in all future times. So here's, that's the preface. Here's part 1. He taught moral philosophy. The first time the term economics appeared in print was written by a textbook author named Alfred Smith, 1890. So Smith didn't learn that term, and it wasn't common until after that time. And many of the modern terms of economics are not found in the Wealth of Nations. He described things that we have names for, but that was rare. Smith wrote a chapter titled On the Principle of Commercial or Mercantile System. That's a system based upon trade. And this notion of trade dates back to 3500 BC. So it's ancient in the history. And if you read any archaeology, you'll find things from the Middle East that are in Ireland, and things that are in Africa wind up in China. It's quite amazing. And he also talked about we have a propensity to truck, to sell things, to barter and exchange. It's a human condition. Mercantilism, a noun. It is quite distinct from the mercantile system It first appears in English in 1881, after Smith was long dead. And OED is Oxford English Dictionary. And it's a magnificent book if you haven't seen it. There's a book written about it entitled The Meaning of Everything. And so you can find the history, all the usages of the English language and their histories. And if you see something missing, you can submit it. It's sort of like Wikipedia. Okay. It defines mercantilism as the economic theory that a nation's wealth, especially its ability to amass bullion, which is gold and silver, is increased by a favorable balance of trade, and that a government should encourage such balance by promoting exports, especially manufactured goods, and restricting imports. A balance of trade is if one country buys 100 million from us and we only buy 50 million from them, that's a negative balance of trade. And if all of them is that way, it's bad. Maybe not. I'll talk about that. Okay. Smith ridiculed the system. He was contemptuous of it, but he joked about it too. He said that Spain was devastated by getting all the gold in from South America and bringing it up at great costs, but it didn't produce any income. And one of his jokes is, if a family did the same and invested all their money in pots and pans, they wouldn't be very well off. So mercantilism is a perversion of the mercantile system. Remember him? And you remember reading, you all are literary people, comic books and Christmas story. Anyway, was he a wealthy man? No, not by Smith standards. And Ebenezer Scrooge was impoverished, at least the way we see him. Okay, problems with mercantilism. It enriched manufacturers, not the landed class of the laborers, but rather the manufacturers, the commercial class. And it acquired gold. It exploited working class, subjugated and people, and established the slave trade. High prices and a lot of smuggling that went on, then inflation and taxation, suppression of wages, and finally it was a zero-sum business. I win, you lose. And Smith said that free trade is a positive sum. If we engage in trades, you win and I win. We'll talk about that more in a bit. Work the commodities, tobacco. I'll think about the American history.
Yeah.
Sugar, rice, cotton, wool. Black workers were bought and sold, and whites were rented. The Southerners during the Civil War said, "You think our slaves are better off? We feed them, we take care of them. But you take those workers up there and don't pay them enough to live on, but they're on their own." Both were right. Specialization of the labor. This is the notion, is that you take a complex set of tasks and rather than having one person do everything, you have it separated into parts. And a great example that he used, I don't normally carry one. This is a straight pen. And it is has a little white, this is out of Artist's Sewing Box, a little white tip on it so you can see it. But these have been made tens of thousands of years. They started out wood. What's Washington's home?
Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon. In the museum there, they have a copper pen that was made, somehow I came across it. And Abigail Adams when John was being the diplomat in Europe, she wrote him and said, please send some pins because they were so expensive. But what they used to do, one person would take copper, for example, that was easy to mold, hammer it until it turns into the diameter you wanted of a piece, and then you have to hammer on one end to put the head on it, and then sharpen the other end. So workers were doing that. Each worker would do all of that. And he said, why not separate and have somebody who's really good at making the wire and let somebody else who's really good at hammering and sharpening and do that. And think about, this is the same principle Henry Ford used with making automobiles. And it was a whole series. And if you've seen any kind of factory, it's a whole series of operations that are divided. So, by the way, in retrospect, a lot of these ideas seem obvious, but they weren't when Smith was around. There are two of these, I've got to be careful. Okay, the language of economics evolved. This is OED, Oxford English Dictionary. Monopoly was first used in English in 1535. Mercantile, which we were just talking about, meaning trade, 1638. Capital the term is originated in the modern sense in the Wealth of Nations. Advantage is another term that appeared in the Wealth of Nations. And what it means is the U.S. is real good at manufacturing, but we have trouble growing coffee beans. So what we'll do is we'll let Brazil grow coffee beans, and we'll import them, and we'll export our manufacturing products to them, and both of us will be better off. That's what that notion is. And then post-Smith, I've already said, mercantilism appeared in English after he died, and a recent term is macroeconomics. There's macroeconomics, little, micro, big. Big looks at nations, unemployment level and inflation rate and so forth. Micro can be a household or a business or some small unity. And that is what Aristotle wrote about. When he was talking about economics, he was talking about it of the estate, the home of a landowner, typically wealthy. Other insights he had, he said there's stages in economic development: hunters, shepherds, agriculture, commerce. He also, as an earlier slide suggested, we have an innate desire to improve ourselves. And he used the term selfish, properly understood, because he was recognized the fact that there's good selfishness and bad selfishness. And good selfishness is prudence. Looking both ways before you cross Jackson. That's prudent. It's not selfish. And we all should do it. It's a good thing. And a motivation that makes the world stand together. The equivalent of gravity for Newton was his idea. In fact, his model, intellectual model, was like Newton's model. And his equivalent was sympathy. And what that is, a trapeze artist. And that is, he commented that if you're seeing some trapeze artists and one of them appears to fall, everybody goes, oh. I was at a baseball game back when the baseball park was over where the, what is it, the stadium now? Anybody remember that? And I saw a, this was in the 50s, but the center fielder was asleep. And the batter hit a ball line drive and hit him. And he was like this. And 500 men went, ugh. So there's election. Okay. This is the big mistake that Adam Smith made. And he was wrong about other things, but this is profoundly important. He believed that the only the only creation of wealth is with our hands. That's why he believed it was a God-given right to make things with our hands. But in that time, it was pre-industrial, so there was not much industry. And so virtually the whole economy was based upon agriculture. So you could, and mining, of course, you could see that. But I just looked this up, and services account for 76% of our economy. And is there anyone in this room that makes their living by working for a manufacturer or tending a farm? How about anybody have a service job like educator, lawyer, doctor, pharmacist? How many workers, employees of Westminster Manor produce things? Well, no, it's not zero. Don't forget the bakers.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay, the cooks.
well, maybe even not all the cooks. It's a lot of things are a blend of both a good and a service. But at any rate, this suggests a shortcoming of the balance of payment that I described, and that is if we double the agriculture that we have, or double the number of coal mines we have, what's that going to do to our national wealth? Minuscule. Where we really make money is on services, and there are manufacturing companies that specialize in that, but we specialize in service, in banking, legal work, and so forth, the global enterprises, and that's where we make all our money. Doesn't make sense, you can't see it, but we pay for those things. And so there is another term called balance of payments, and it considers both the money and the services that are the money transferred by services. So that's a really important thing. So tariffs and embargoes and all that stuff doesn't make much difference. And if you want to attack another country, go after their services.
Well, what about all of our agriculture that we produce?
In terms of the percent of income, it is minuscule. And what are farmers like today? What are farms like today? Modern farms, most of them.
They're big.
They're massive, and mom and pop farms are virtually gone. They are not economical,
Right.
and some of them have, hundreds of acres. Yes, sir.
If that's right, why, if I wanted to do in the United States, why wouldn't I just shoot all the farmers? And the rest of the people will die.
What?
Well, I'll get back to you on that. Yeah. And if I don't get in touch with you, that's Stuart. Or Stuart.
Well, the interesting thing is farming is a very capital-intensive
Yes, it is.
industry. Where
You bet.
how many of you desire to have a green John Deere tractor
Yeah.
to mow your lawn?
Oh,
Okay. But for your farm,
yeah,
or
we're
Yeah.
farm, and
for
we
the
have
yellow or orange or whatever.
Yeah, we had.
So it's a very capital intensive.
You're right.
industry.
You're right, and it's a mix, like, you get surgery, you get sutures. That's a product, the sutures, so it's a balance. But I have a cousin who's had, her family has a farm in South Texas, and they have some of these massive tractors that are, use GPS to plow, and they're air conditioned, and I don't think they have any TVs in them, but they're pretty.
Well, they have radio.
Yes, sir.
We do on our.
So did the pre-Adam Smith mercantile system include crown monopolies? Was that an aspect of it?
As, not in the context, you're right, but there was one of the, he talked a lot about problems with the law, and there were a lot of them. One is there were guilds that, if you worked with metals, you were an ironmonger, and you and only you and members of the guilds could do that. No one else could do that. And another problem was these big landed estates, not only in Scotland, but throughout Great Britain, where there'd be these massive properties, and there was primogeniture. The first person, first male, had to own, pass down, male, mind you, and there was something called entrails, and that was you couldn't subdivide. And he said, imagine the productivity of agriculture if all those lands were divided up into small farms.
But was there things like crown, certain goods that the crown had a monopoly on, that crown tea or coffee or other commodities?
He didn't write about that. They had their grounds, but whether they were using them to produce something, I don't remember. But I do know it was a capital offense to kill a king's deer if you go hunting. So beware when you go to England. Yes, ma'am.
Is this GDP for the US or for the world?
It's just the latest data for the U.S. So the numbers would change profoundly by country. And it's absolute advantage. You go to where you make your money gets the greatest return. So some focus on agriculture, others on industry. We used to make all the chips here, but we made a lot more money in central processing units, but not in memory chips. So we had to make a choice, and we say, we'll devote all our time to make these really expensive chips, so these little inexpensive chips can be made in Asia. So, anyway, let's see what else we have. I have trouble with my pointer in. Here we go. Okay, here's another myth about, or this belays the myth that Adam Smith was devil take the hindmost type of economics. So these are protections he recommends to protect the poor and middle class. Caps on interest rates, minimum wages, progressive taxes, so you charge a higher rate for high-income people than low one. Funding for public education and churches. And like England, there was a national church there. Paper money is for the rich. Coins were around for the poor. And so we maintained that the case. Regulation of bank formations, because a lot of crooks were creating the image of a bank, sort of like our image of a university, and embezzling people. So we did that. He had wanted laws to prevent stock manipulation, and then we required firewalls in Edinburgh and Glasgow. A lot of the buildings, especially Edinburgh, slammed right against each other. How many have been to Edinburgh? Wow, that's wonderful. But those buildings in the old part of town, they'd have basements and sub-basements, and people lived way down in there. And it was a nasty place, by the way. But if you had all those buildings against each other, if a fire was in one, it could spread unless you put a barrier up. Part 2. This, I had a couple of handouts left over from last time back there, but I was invited to attend the reenactment of his baptism, as you say, in 2023. Kirkcaldy is the town where he lived, and I'm going to show you part of that trip and part of my presentation I made there. Okay, here is the program. The carriage arrived at the Old Kirk. Kirk is the Scottish word for church, and it's an ancient church. Baptizing was performed with 17th century silver. Choir sang hymns, dialogue describing Smith's importance, lecture by me on the untold story of Smith that you're hearing. And there was performance of periodic music from that era, and then some Robert Burns poetry was read. Here's the carriage. There is, let me see here. Where is it? Somehow I didn't want it, didn't like, but there, that woman's holding a baby, if you can tell. And it was creepy, the baby, it looked so real. I don't think it was, but it sure was. And the father with the frilly vest, and then the pastor and a witness for the wedding. But yeah, that baptism, thank you. The parents were already married. Okay, that's the silver. And you can see on that lectern or pulpit, 1244. That's how old the building is. It's there are two churches right close to each other, and this one is used as a essentially a public auditorium. They have lots of programs in it, and the church services are in the other one. Okay, baptism. Okay, this is my presentation. Smith, Science and Religion. A theist believes that God is active in the world. A deist is someone that God designed everything to perfection and left the world alone, so no personal God. An agnostic is someone not sure God exists. And an atheist doesn't believe in anything spiritual or supernatural, including God. So this is especially important when we talk about Smith, because in academic circles, talking about religion is taboo. If a mathematician says, this is my proof and God tells me it is true, that doesn't work. You don't get that paper published. Okay, Sir Isaac Newton. The most elegant system of the sun, planets, and comets could not have arisen without the design and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. And because his dominion, he is called God. You'll never see that in a physics book. Okay. He also was an alchemist. He had the absurd idea that, and alchemists did. They thought they could convert lead into gold. And as you see, in 1980 it was done by California Nobel Prize winner. The problem is the yield was so low it's not economical to do. Anyway. Okay, Smith, the invisible hand. I showed you, in fact, one of the handouts back there has a copy of my book. But the invisible hand is the hand of God in his view. Every individual is led by the invisible hand, or the beneficent God, to make nearly the same distribution of the necessaries of wealth which would have been had the earth been divided in equal portions among all inhabitants, and thus without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interests of society and affords the means for the multiplication of the species, the human race. So the key to this is that even if we just focus on what we do best, then we will, his notion is, we'll wind up finding a proper use of that thing that will benefit everyone, even if we don't, if that's not our intention. I'm on a group that meets on Zoom every Thursday, and you promised not to heckle me. Thanks, Max. But we were talking this morning about Elon Musk, and a member has spent his life on Wall Street, and he said he doesn't think Musk is interested in making any money. And maybe it's because he doesn't need it anymore. But he said his primary motivation is, he thinks it's just the creation, and that's byproduct for him. But at any rate, that's the basic notion. So if we do something that's legit, we're rewarded or punished based upon where it's desirable. Okay. This is more about religion. The institution for the instruction of people of all ages are chiefly those for religious instruction. This is a species of instruction of which the object is not so much to render the people good citizens in this world as to prepare them for another and better world to come. And this sounds like he's not a deist, but he's like a theist. And maybe he vacillated. But by the way, Karl Marx was a big fan of Adam Smith, and so was Milton Friedman. Two people couldn't be more unalike. But what Marx liked was his labor theory of value I just talked about, and it turned out to be wrong. But he also talked about religion being the opiates of the people. And Smith puts another spin on that. Okay. He taught a course in moral philosophy. That's the chair I turned on his side. Had 4 legs. Natural religion. That is essentially, he would have argued that underneath all of the religions around, or within all the religions around the world, there are common elements. And that's the natural religion. And then it's adapted by and maybe perverted by societies as they accommodate it in their own society. So that was an important part he talked about, and it was especially in his book, Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is the next part of his book, of these legs, that's ethics, and he wrote a book on that. The third is jurisprudence. I mentioned that at the beginning, and that's legal theory. And virtually no one outside of Smith Scholar is aware of this or has read it. There's an organization called Liberty Fund that publishes cheap copies of all of his works. It's a wonderful thing. But he didn't write a book on jurisprudence. But fortunately, they found some notes of students had taken in his classes. So they combined them and made the volume of this jurisprudence. When I was at UT, I said, take all my notes you take in here, put them in your safety deposit. They'll be worth a fortune. No one's thanked me yet. And then finally, public policy. And that is what Smith's book, the intent of his book was to, Wealth of Nations, was to instruct senior government officials about how to go about making a fortune or messing one up. And so it was public policy. By the way, the Theory of Moral Sentiments and Wealth of Nations are largely histories. Theory of Moral Sentiments is the history of all, he compiles all the known theories of ethics and evaluated them, picked out what he thought was the best. And the same thing with the Wealth of Nations. He talks about all sorts of stories about the way the issues of poverty and wealth were dealt with throughout history. That's why it's 900 pages long. I think I'm... No. Here, I brought this last time, but I had to show you. This was my intellectual Mount Everest. It's has 903 pages, 394,119 words, and it's the font is 9, and it has print in the margin. It's 7. So you need a magnifying glass or be young to be able to read this stuff. But have it here. Okay. And as you see here at the bottom, Wealth of Nations, the materials other than Wealth of Nations account for 69% of his work. So he's so much more than just doing that. Okay. I'm making this up. Adam Smith is hired to come at UT. And the president interviews him. He's such a prestigious guy. And he said, I want you to pick what you like to teach here. And he looks at the course schedule and he says, well, I'd like to I'm interested in natural living, so I'd like to teach in the Presbyterian Seminary nearby, the history department and philosophy. On ethics, some of you will find this ironic, but professional schools and philosophy, those would be good places for me. And jurisprudence, I'd like to teach in your law school. Public policy, you have a government department and you have the LBJ school, so I'd like to teach in there too. There is also a natural, moral philosophy was all of that. Natural philosophy was all the natural sciences. And the fact that those two men could do that was, or two professors could do that, in part was there was so we know vastly more about everything than we did then, and you may not be interested in. But I made a graph today. You can't. Anyone interested in this, I can give you a copy. But it's a plot of the number of scholarly science papers from the 17th century to the 20th century, and it goes like this. So after World War II, it's just gone through the roof. And here's one for the social sciences, and it got started much, much later, but it really took off in the 1900s, but it's not nearly as far fully developed. So all of these sociology, anthropology, psychology, all those things, none of them existed in his this day. Okay. So, this, Lee, I exclude you from this.
Thank you.
But this is the way many economists view the four-legged table.
Oh.
We don't need those others. All we need is the wealth of nations. By the way, liberal economist Paul Samuelson spread the misrepresentation of Smith's work more than libertarian Milton Friedman. And this sounds ironic, but Paul Samuelson taught at MIT, I believe it was, and he was under real heat. There was something called macroeconomics, a curse. You're going in and tampering with these powers you can't deal with. Keynes came along with the idea we could get rid of the depression by doing that way, and he was under pressure to be fired. And so he said something I owned every edition of his book and compared them. But you could see how he did good, really messed up in one volume, and then did good after. So I guess he was, whoever the regent was giving him a hard time, went on somewhere else. But the reason that plus his dissertation was essentially on a book he wrote about economics. And it's a brilliant book, and it was the classic book that used in economics courses all across the country. So more economists read that book than anything Friedman ever read. Anybody study out of Samuelson's book? Yeah, there you go. It's a brilliant book. Okay, let's see here. Okay, big debate, superstition versus truth. There, I've got 5 minutes, so I'll try to be quick. There's a big debate going on in the various literatures about whether God exists or not. And at the forefront is a guy named Richard Dawkins, who wrote a book called The God Delusion. And he also wrote about genes as being destructive. And he was criticized, or he criticized the people that misinterpreted his book about that. And then Francis Collin is a scientist who is a theist. So atheists argue belief in God delusion, no evidence God exists, God is not needed to explain the universe, simpler explanations are better. I'll say more about that in a minute. Response, there are historical records, there is an unseen reality, science also based on faith, simpler the better, assuming mathematics always works out, every question has an answer. Religion has simplicity to monotheism, and finally, you can't prove that something doesn't exist, so it's a stalemate. So if you read about people, they've resolved this issue. They're confused. This is not going to be resolved in this life at any rate. Okay, the Occam's razor is a dignified way of saying the simpler the better. William of Occam, that's where he lived, was a Franciscan friar, as you see his years of date. He went to Oxford, and he used Occam's razor to reject Plato's concepts of ideals. And he said of everything, there's a chair, there are many different types of chair, but picture the quintessential chair, and that is an ideal. It exists in our minds, but it exists. And Occam said that was nonsense. But you'd think he would use Occam's razor on the notion of whether God existed or not. But he said religious belief is acquired through faith, through nothing else, not through reason. So anyway, and as Matt Proops said, QED, so this is my QED. So there you go. Thank you. I'll be sending out a test. So anyway, any questions before we adjourn? Or, no, let's not do that. But if you would like to talk more about any of this, and especially if you want to drill deeper on things, I'm delighted. Yes, sir.
So if Adam Smith were alive today, what would he be saying about the modern economy and its regulation?
That's a good question. Lee answered it for you. No, I think his mind would explode. How about your great-grandparents? Could they picture what's going on today? Everything is going good and bad, just going crazy. And no, it's not no sign of diminishing returns. It's hanging under your hat.
So this concept of laissez-faire, and what you're saying is that the concept that's being advanced today to describe laissez-faire is not at all what Adam Smith meant.
Well, he never used that word. That's a European word that was attached to him, and it was in use when he was around, and he visited France where it came from, but he never used that term. That was not his.
So that's a big misinterpretation. That's what
Yeah,
you're out there.
yeah, exactly.
Is that a Friedman misinterpretation?
I don't never see Friedman use that word either, but he was a libertarian, so. Yeah. So, yes, sir.
Did Smith have, I assume he knew about the rest of the world,
Yeah, a lot.
but it appeared, at least from your discussion, that very little of it entered into his analysis, or?
Oh, I mentioned that, but didn't make it clear, saying both that and moral sentiments for history books. So he's doing all sorts of historical analysis and comparative analysis at a single point in time, like how Spain ruined themselves by trying to get too much out of the system. Yeah, but it's a phenomenal book. Yes, sir. Yes.
I believe you were the speaker at Adam Smith's birthday party, 300th birthday party.
Yeah, yeah.
What led to your selection to be the speaker at that event?
Did you hear the question? Well, I was invited, and I went to Scotland and to Kirkcaldy a number of times, and became a close friend of an elder of the Presbyterian Church there, who organized that event. And so she asked me if I'd like to come. I said sure. I told her that if I had a choice between going there and the King's inauguration, I'd go to Glasgow or to Kirkcaldy. But it was a great honor, good fun. So, but I don't think, well, I was low. The others fit pretty well into the theme, but I was sort of tagged on because they were reminiscent, and Robert Burns' poetry. Anyway, but it was great, and I love singing them all.
Indeed.